This is one of the most heartbreaking and shocking cases you will ever hear. A young French student, Sophie Colombet, was full of life and dreams for the future. But one rainy night in Brisbane, her walk home through a park turned into a tragedy that devastated her family, outraged an entire nation, and left scars that still remain today. This is not just another true crime story. This is perhaps the most chilling, tragic, and unforgettable video we've ever made. Stay with us, because once you know what happened to Sophie, you will never forget it. A student left for her university classes, but she never made it home. When police began investigating, they quickly uncovered chilling clues. Yet those discoveries were only the beginning. By the time the case was finally solved, it had shaken not only Australia, but far beyond its borders. Its reverberations still felt to this day. Sophie Colombet was born in 1993 in the quiet French village of Saint-Julien-Montagnais, a picturesque corner of the Alps where she grew up alongside her parents and two older brothers. From an early age, Sophie displayed a passion for music, playing in her village's local ensemble. But her dreams stretched far beyond her hometown. She longed to see the world. After finishing school, Sophie pursued that dream. She moved to Denmark to study international business and later traveled to Germany for an internship. Her ambitions and determination carried her further still. In 2013, she was accepted into a master's program at Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia. She moved there with her boyfriend, and together they rented a small apartment near the campus. But after a year, his visa expired, forcing him to return to France. Sophie still had another year left to complete her studies. For a time, she considered going back with him. Ultimately, she chose to stay and finish what she had started. Life in Australia was not easy. On top of her coursework, Sophie juggled multiple jobs just to stay afloat. Waiting tables, cleaning houses, even offering private French lessons. Still, it wasn't enough to cover rent on her own. Eventually, she moved in with fellow university students, sharing an apartment to keep expenses manageable. It was a choice that seemed practical at the time. But soon, Sophie's life would take a turn no one could have imagined. On the morning of March 27, 2014, 21-year-old Sophie Colombet set off for Griffith University, as she always did. Her schedule that day stretched late into the evening, but she stayed in touch with her boyfriend throughout, exchanging messages as usual. Then, without warning, her replies stopped. Hours passed. By the next morning, there was still nothing. Her boyfriend's concern turned to dread. Unable to reach her by phone, he searched online for any sign of her, eventually checking the Brisbane Police Department's social media page. What he found there made his blood run cold. Police had posted photos of women's jewelry, asking the public if anyone recognized the items. He recognized them instantly. They were Sophie's. He called Brisbane police immediately. That was when they told him what had happened. Earlier that morning, officers had been contacted by a homeless man living in a park not far from Sophie's apartment. While walking through the grounds, he had noticed someone stretched out on a bench, covered in old newspapers as though trying to keep warm. At first, he assumed it was another person sleeping rough, but as he drew closer, he saw it was a young woman. He tried to wake her, gently shaking her shoulder, calling out. There was no response. Then he noticed the blood matted into her hair. Reaching for a pulse, he felt nothing. That was the moment he realized she was gone. Terrified, he ran straight to the police. What began as a routine morning had just become the start of a homicide investigation that would haunt Australia for years. Are you ready to dive into some of the most terrifying cases in the world? Don't miss a single detail. Oh, and make sure to subscribe to my channel. Your support gives me the motivation to create even better content in the future. We're just a few subscribers away from reaching our first 500, so help me hit that milestone. Now let's get back to this chilling journey into the world of crime. Police quickly confirmed that the young woman was dead and sent her body to the medical examiner. The autopsy revealed the horror of what she had endured. Sophie had suffered a catastrophic head injury, one brutal blow from a heavy object. She bore multiple abrasions across her body, and examiners confirmed she had been sexually assaulted. Investigators determined she was attacked only a few yards from the bench where she was found, then dragged and left there. Her killer had carefully arranged her body, covering her with newspapers, likely hoping she would blend into the park's scenery and go unnoticed. In that environment, the ruse was chillingly effective. The park was a known gathering place for the homeless. Seeing someone asleep on a bench, wrapped in scraps of paper, wasn't unusual. If the killer was counting on that assumption, it worked. Medical experts went further. They estimated the assault had taken place the previous evening, but Sophie hadn't died immediately. She clung to life for hours, lying on that bench deep into the night, slowly succumbing to her injuries. If someone had called for help, doctors believed she might have been saved, but no one did. Passers-by simply assumed she was another homeless woman asleep in the dark. When detectives sent Sophie's boyfriend a photo of the victim, and he confirmed it was her, the case shifted into high gear. Investigators threw every resource into the hunt for her killer. Their first priority was finding her clothing and personal belongings. When Sophie was discovered, she had been left wearing nothing but her jewelry. Despite combing through the park and checking every trash bin nearby, investigators couldn't find a single trace of Sophie's missing belongings. With no physical evidence, they shifted focus to reconstructing her final day, step by step, hoping to retrace her movements. CCTV footage from near her apartment showed Sophie leaving that morning and boarding a bus bound for the university. She spent nearly the entire day on campus, attending classes as usual. At around 8:30 p.m., she began her journey home. By then, rain had started to fall. A classmate offered her a ride, but Sophie declined, saying she would take the bus instead. Cameras captured her boarding at one stop and later exiting at her usual stop. From there, her path home was familiar. She needed to cross a bridge spanning the river. But to reach that bridge, she had to cut through the very park where her body would later be found. After that, the trail went dark. No more cameras, no more footage, nothing to reveal what happened next. Detectives turned to the public, appealing for witnesses who might have been out that rainy night. But the weather had worked against them. Almost no one had been in the park, leaving the killer with the perfect cover to strike unseen. Police also asked people to watch for Sophie's missing items: her phone, tablet, umbrella, and handbag. When none of them appeared, divers were called in to search the river. Before long, they recovered an umbrella about a mile downstream, but even that discovery provided little certainty. Investigators couldn't confirm whether it had ever belonged to Sophie. News of Sophie's murder spread quickly across Brisbane, and the city's anxiety escalated for more than one reason. First, police admitted they could not rule out the possibility that the killer might strike again. Second, Sophie's death was not an isolated tragedy. She was the fourth international student murdered in Brisbane in just a matter of months. Though the earlier cases were unrelated and the suspects already behind bars, the pattern was impossible to ignore. The sense of unease only grew. Meanwhile, Detectives pored over hours of surveillance footage from around the park, frame by frame. At last, they noticed something. A man walking past the park, both before and after the narrow time window in which Sophie was believed to have been killed. That window had been pinned down almost to the minute, thanks to Sophie's movements captured on other cameras. What made the man stand out wasn't just his presence, it was his silence. Despite repeated public appeals for anyone in the area that night to come forward, he never did. Even with heavy rain that evening, dozens of people contacted police to say they had passed through or nearby. Yet this man's name never surfaced. To detectives, that silence was damning. They traced his movements through additional cameras. Footage showed him entering a subway station near the park and riding several stops. After that, the trail disappeared. The one lead investigators had was slipping away into the city. Detectives suspected the mysterious man might have been heading toward the train station near the airport, possibly planning to slip out of Brisbane. They returned to the park, speaking with people who spent much of their time there, hoping someone might recognize him from the footage. Before long, they found a lid. A witness claimed he had been drinking with the man on the night of the murder. He knew him by name, Ben. According to the witness, Ben had been staying at a homeless hostel a few miles from the park, across the river. The hostel already carried a grim reputation. Many of its residents were recently released prisoners with nowhere else to go. When police arrived and showed staff a still from the surveillance footage, they recognized the man instantly. He was one of their residents, 25-year-old Benjamin Millward. Then came another disturbing detail. Staff admitted they hadn't seen Benjamin since the night Sophie was killed. He had disappeared, leaving behind almost all of his belongings, as though he'd fled in a hurry. For investigators, the picture was becoming clearer. They now had a name, a face, and a prime suspect. Finding Benjamin Millward became their top priority. 8 days after Sophie's murder, police went public, releasing his name and photo, and urging anyone with information on his whereabouts to come forward. As detectives dug into Benjamin Millward's past, a troubling history emerged. In 2012, he had been released from prison after serving time for assault. Not long after, he was arrested again for violating parole, only gaining full freedom the following year. His record didn't stop there. It included theft, drug offenses, and a string of smaller charges that painted the picture of a man long in conflict with the law. Conversations with other hostel residents added darker layers. One recalled that just hours before Sophie's murder, Benjamin had been heavily intoxicated, drunk and high on drugs. He even admitted he hadn't used in a long time because the last time had ended badly. Another resident remembered seeing him in the park around 5 p.m., taking another dose. They eventually parted ways, as the witness wanted to make it back to the hostel before the 9 p.m. curfew. Benjamin, however, never returned that night. That same resident later reported spotting him outside the hostel around 11 p.m. after Sophie's murder. Benjamin, he said, looked visibly shaken, nervous, and was acting strangely. While police searched for him, Benjamin's family and acquaintances began speaking out. To them, the allegations seemed unthinkable. Every one of them insisted they could not believe he was capable of murder. But investigators, piecing together his criminal history, erratic behavior, and troubling sightings on the night of Sophie's death, knew the evidence was leading in only one direction. Benjamin's family admitted they hadn't heard from him since the day Sophie was killed. Desperate, they even went on television, pleading with him to come forward and clear his name. But Benjamin stayed silent. Detectives grew increasingly convinced he had already fled Brisbane. His photo and details were circulated across towns and states, and soon a promising lead surfaced. Staff at a small hotel in Ballina, across the state line, reported that a man matching Benjamin's description had stayed there for several days. But by the time police arrived, he was gone. Warnings went out to officers in nearby towns, urging them to be on alert. The break came in Coffs Harbour, a coastal city just a few dozen miles away. In the middle of the night, 2 officers spotted a man on the street who looked exactly like the fugitive. They approached and asked, "Are you Benjamin?" His response was almost casual. Yeah, you got me." Is this because of the internet? Benjamin Millward was immediately arrested and extradited back to Brisbane. When detectives ran his DNA, the results left no room for doubt. The sample matched the skin particles found under Sophie's fingernails, tying him directly and irrefutably to her murder. After Benjamin Millward was taken into custody to await trial, his lawyer spoke briefly to the press. He said his client was overwhelmed by the public attention and the pressure of the case, but otherwise was doing fine. When the trial began, Benjamin made little effort to deny his guilt. In court, he admitted to Sophie's murder and even turned to her family, asking for forgiveness. But then came a revelation that stunned everyone in the room. Benjamin confessed that after attacking and assaulting Sophie, he had told her he was going to get help. Instead, he walked away, leaving her bleeding and alone on a park bench, exposed to the pouring rain, slowly dying through the night. Before fleeing Brisbane, he dumped all of her belongings into the river, erasing what little trace remained of her final moments. When pressed for a motive, Benjamin claimed he hadn't been in control of himself. He blamed the drugs he had taken that day, insisting he could barely remember the attack, only flashes of what he had done. But experts dismissed his explanation. The substances in his system, they said, were not known to trigger such extreme violence, nor could they explain the calculated choices he made that night. Forensic psychologists suggested Benjamin's actions were not the product of intoxication alone. They pointed to something far darker. Experts made it clear that Benjamin's condition could not be used as an excuse. The drugs he had taken would not normally cause such severe memory loss, yet he continued to insist he could barely recall anything. Investigators countered with the obvious. Benjamin had been clear-headed enough to purchase train tickets and leave Brisbane without drawing any attention to himself. In the end, the court sentenced him to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving at least 20 years. He also received an additional 15 years for the sexual assault, to run concurrently. Given his age, this meant Benjamin Millward could still walk free before turning 50. After the trial, his mother spoke publicly. She praised her son for admitting to his crimes and placed the blame squarely on drugs, insisting he would never have committed such acts sober. Her words did little to ease public outrage. Though the case had been solved relatively quickly, the shockwaves it sent through Brisbane lasted far longer. Locals demanded increased security in the park where Sophie was killed, and many criticized the hostel for housing recently released violent offenders alongside the vulnerable. Women came forward with their own stories of being harassed in that very park, pointing out that they had never once seen police patrolling the area. Memorials for Sophie spread across the city. More than 2,000 people took part in a candlelight march, retracing the route she should have taken home that night. Her funeral was held in her hometown in France, drawing nearly 1,200 mourners, an astonishing number for a village of only 1,500. It was the largest funeral the community had seen in decades, not since the death of a beloved mayor. So many people came to pay their respects that they filled 8 condolence journals from cover to cover. Sophie's murder was solved, but its legacy was lasting. A story of loss, outrage, and a city forced to confront the cracks in its own safety. Sophie's story is heartbreaking, and it reminds us that danger can appear in the most ordinary places, even on a simple walk home. She was a bright young woman chasing her dreams, and her life was stolen in the cruelest way. Her case shows us how important it is to stay aware, to look out for one another, and to never ignore warning signs. It's not just about true crime, it's about real life, and how quickly everything can change. If there's one lesson we can take from Sophie's tragedy, it's this: be cautious, protect yourself, and never take safety for granted. Because sometimes, being alert can truly save a life. Share your thoughts on this story in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.